And now, Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks.
Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ, Bucky, and trust me when we tell you this is going to be the best podcast that we've ever done.
Oh, without question, I think it is one of the best, if not the best podcast that we have come together and done. This is awesome. I can't wait to kind of share. Like Urban Meyer, three-time national champion head coach, is going to join us and have a deep, insightful conversation about all things building a championship program. It is terrific. I can't wait to share that. You and I are going to talk about your quarterback cluster rankings, how they were prior to the season, where they currently sit now. And then we're going to talk about, it's a big college football weekend, college players to watch, a lot of eyes on a lot of big games. Everyone knows about the Alabama-LSU game. You just recently saw Oregon and USC. So we're going to talk about the five-star players that showed up in those games and how those performances could impact how we see them in the spring.
Yeah, we're going to have a lot of fun talking about those quarterbacks, and we're going to take some of your questions that you guys have left us on Apple Podcasts. Again, if you just leave us a review and a little rating on there, drop a question, we'll answer that each and every week. So we got some of those to answer today. But, Buck, sometimes we save interviews, we put them on the back of the podcast. I say we don't do that today. We had a chance to visit with Urban Meyer. And a lot of times when you get coaches and people on other podcasts or radio interviews, you get a coach and you maybe get, 5-10 minutes, and it's a lot of fluff and it's a lot of stuff about, this week's game. We had a chance to talk to a guy who's won 3 national championships, and he spent 30 minutes with us laying out literally from the first meeting with his team to how he set and put a culture in place that's had been tried and true at every place he's ever been, from Bowling Green to Utah to Florida to Ohio State. He's done nothing but win football games, and I feel like we got a chance to get some of that secret sauce in this conversation. So, again, 30-minute conversation with Urban Meyer, and I say we don't wait any longer. Let's let the folks hear our conversation with Mr. Meyer. Well, Buck, I couldn't be more excited to be joined by our next guest here. It's Coach Urban Meyer. And, Coach, we're going to get into football here in a second. But I'm going to get to my point here. April 14th, 1996, I'm a high school senior. I'm going to watch a bad Padres baseball team. Fernando Valenzuela is actually playing for the Padres at this time, throwing about 81 miles an hour. And Mark Lemke hits 2 home runs off Fernando Valenzuela, which is a weird story for Urban Meyer, except for the fact that you and Mark Lemke were teammates in the Braves minor league organization. I did not know until I got ready for this about your minor league baseball career, Coach. I need to know more about you as a baseball player.
Well, obviously, my mom thought I was great, and that's probably why I went into college football coaching, because I had a hard time hitting that deuce, especially with the wooden bat. And then the fastballs went from being, like you said, 83, 84 to 95, 96, and that's why I decided to move on and had an arm injury. I think I actually had Tommy John before it was Tommy John. That's how old I am. But wow. I loved it. Lemke and Ron Gant were my boys.
Hey, Coach, this is fascinating awesome. Because we've talked ad nauseum about the reason why more athletes at the younger ages should be multi-sport stars. Now that I'm knowing about your past playing baseball as well as playing football, how do you feel about multi-sport athletes, particularly when you were a coach and you're recruiting guys?
Well, you hit a passion with me. That's something that I can give you my perspective, my son's perspective on my daughters, and then because they're all Division I athletes, and then just recruiting perspective. So the thing that I'm dead set against that single sport athletes. I think that's wrong. I think the student, the kid, the young person is getting screwed. I think that's wrong. They should, they should play other sports. The fact that when I think some of these over anxious fathers and uncles that think that when they're 6 years old, the kid's going to do nothing but play quarterback. I think that's wrong. When my son was playing baseball, I was advised by many people that he should stop playing other sports and just focus on baseball. And I'll get big arguments with people. And a lot of those same kids that were, 9, 10 years old were great. They blew out, they burned out, and they're not playing anymore. I went back and found out back in Florida that when my son was that age, that most of those kids, great, really good players that never went on because you just get burnt out doing a sport and you never learn to compete. I think everybody should play basketball. I think so. It's one of the great sports to develop toughness and competitiveness. And so you hit a wheelhouse with me. So my son played all three sports. My daughters played all sports, and I feel very passionate about that.
Yeah, Bucky mentioned it. The last couple of weeks we've had a chance to talk to LeBron James' football coach, Tony Romo's basketball coach. So I think those guys turned out okay playing multiple sports. I'm just curious, in the recruiting process, would you find yourself going to some basketball games and watching guys play other sports as well as just studying them on the football field?
Oh, all the time. A matter of fact, we recruited kids out. Malik Harrison, probably a high draft pick for the Buckeyes, outside linebacker, was a good football player. But he was an exceptional basketball player, competitive, tough guy, and then jump out of the gym, and we took him off the basketball court. I've done that many, many times. And, it's ironic. I did recruit LeBron James. I was at Notre Dame receiver coach, and he was a sophomore football player, and the coach at St. Vincent St. Mary was a good friend. And he said, "What do you think of this guy?" He's like, "Oh, my gosh." And so I went and offered him a scholarship, and they started laughing at me and said, "He's not going to play. You don't know who that is, do you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "That's LeBron James." I go, "Who's LeBron James?" So LeBron and I LeBron remembers that. We still talk about it. By the way, he would be a fine football player.
That's terrific. Coach, obviously you're one of the more successful coaches who have ever done it in college football. You've turned around multiple programs. You've had national championships at a couple of different places. When you think about building a championship culture, what does that entail?
Well, it's a lot of work. It's something that I think is one of the most overused words in the English language. I don't think people understand it. To say that I really did, I did not as a young coach. And I think culture is everything. And I actually talk quite a bit on that. We teach a class in leadership. And so, for example, culture to me, I know there's many definitions. Culture to me is, what does your product or what does your team, what does your organization look like? What does it feel like? And what does it act like? And not necessarily when you're winning by 40 points against FAU. It's what's it look like in a rivalry game? What's it look like and feel like and act like on 4th down and 2? Or in the stock market turns upside down, and culture it's got to be the vision of the CEO or the head coach, and you can't really you can't waver on your culture. So I think it's you look at all successful programs. I think that's one of the reasons why Ohio State is so successful. We built a culture that survives adversity, that survives early entry in the NFL draft, a coaching change, and I think culture is essential to. You look at the Patriots, and you can say, "Boy, they got a great coach. They got a great players." Absolutely, that's true. But name someone who doesn't have a great coach and a great player in the NFL. They're all great. Mm-hmm. The thing that makes the New England Patriots unique is their culture, developed by Bill Belichick, survives transition of players, survives injuries, and it's culture.
Well, Coach, Ohio State's had a long, rich tradition of winning football games. But before you got there, it wasn't at that level, not coming off of a great season. Talk about building that culture and what you did there to build something that's sustained. So I'm just curious, that very first meeting with your football team after taking that job at Ohio State, what was your message to those guys?
Well, I think a leader has to, whenever he takes over the situation, show respect for the previous regime and the previous, because you have to. And I hear coaches, another pet peeve I feel very strong about is when I hear a coach or the media say, "Wait till he gets his players in there." What the hell does that mean? The minute you say, "I'm taking this job," they become your players. And we've had great turnarounds, fast turnarounds, because we're made it very clear that we love you. Lou Holtz helped me with this. My first speech every time is, "I realize you did not pick me. However, I picked you because I believe in you. You're my guys now." And when I hear coaches say, "Well, the previous staff," I would fire a coach if I ever heard a coach say that. Show respect to the previous staff. And I love Jim Tressel, and obviously great football coach, Luke Fickell. And the program wasn't far off. Obviously, there's very good players here. And when I took over Bowling Green, I told people it took a little bit of a fire hose to get it going. Utah was in pretty good shape, more of a garden hose. And then Florida was, not much problem. Then Ohio State was really in good shape and really good players, really good culture. We just had to fix a couple things, and like everybody does. And most importantly, we showed our players we had great respect for the previous. We love you, and we're going to push you to be your best.
You know, Coach, it's interesting that you brought up the Utah program. I actually met you as a scout on the road in Utah 2003. I think it was the first time I was exposed to, one, your spread, because Paris Warren was playing H-back or wing-back, just running all over the field, and you're flipping it to him and doing all kinds of stuff. And I was fascinated by that. But I was really fascinated by how when I stepped into Oregon, I felt like it was hard-nosed, it was tough. I felt like it was a little different. Every place that you go, do you build the culture a little differently based on what the history of the program is, or is it something that is in you that you have a core set of things that you believe in and the program kind of follows to that?
Well, what a great question, and I appreciate you asking, because these are, by the way, you guys are great. These are real. Sometimes I do interviews and it's like a clown show. You know, this is really good stuff.
We're trying to learn, Coach.
So building a culture, this is where the culture has to be yours. First of all, respect what was there before. However, and I'm going to give you the speech. It's you need to believe it. You need to sell it, and you need to demand it. So believe it, it has to be an objective truth. For example, if I walked in a place and I said, if we throw for more yards, then the other team will win. That's a lie. That's not true. Mm-hmm. You know, the culture at Ohio State we built, I can go through it with you, it's time tested. It's built on objective truths. It's built on history. It's built on experience. And I can share that with you at the end. Then you have to sell it. We're in a world right now that back when I played, your coach said do something, you did it. Not now. And you can about it, or you can just say this is the way it is. You have to sell it over, and we use social media, we use messaging, constantly selling our culture. And then there reaches a point with your staff and your players that you have to demand it. And if you're not living under our culture, you have to leave. And so it's believe it, sell it, demand it. The culture at Ohio State, I always had a vision and a dream that we would play fearless. And I've worked at so many places where the players were scared to make mistakes. And so my first part, we have 3 parts of the culture. And number 1 is, it's called relentless effort. The sound bite is 4 to 6, A to B. That's the length of a play. And everybody has a point A and point B. You go as hard as you can. If you make a mistake, no problem. But that's a soundbite that I know our players had constantly going through their mind during the course of the game is, I don't care if I make a mistake. You know, you go as hard as you can. And I've had, I've been criticized. Some of our teams have had penalties over the years. And I would be okay with penalties as long as it was non-effort related. Now, stupid penalties I had a problem with. But if you're going to go as hard as you can't say, but don't make any mistakes, because then players in conflict. The number 2 is called competitive excellence, and that's a John Woodenism, and that's, I want you to embrace, we're going to work harder than anybody else in America. And I don't want you to complain about it. I don't want you to worry about it. You know, I tell them in recruiting that you are going to be rewarded in the NFL most likely, and we're going to win. Just do what we ask you to do. It's going to be the most miserable, hard stuff you've ever done, but embrace it. And then the final piece is, it's called power of the unit. And the greatest form of, I use the word inspiration instead of motivation, because motivation is short-lived. Inspiration is long-lived and sustains. And it's love. The greatest form of motivation is the brotherhood. And that's used in the special forces, that's used in the best forms of corporate America. And the best teams and the best units are those that love each other and care about each other. So that's the culture of Ohio State.
Coach, I love that. I want to get into some of these players you've been around here in a minute, but one more thing. The quarterback position, as you know, is the hardest one for us to scout. Each and every year you think you've got it figured out and you don't. So I'm always trying to figure out what guys have done well and figure out what they're looking for. We've asked all kinds of players, coaches, GMs, et cetera. And I remember I actually listened to one of your, I think it was a post-recruiting press conference, and I pulled out my pen because somebody asked you the question about what you looked for in quarterbacks, and I had competitive spirit, toughness, leadership, intelligence, and get out of a bad play. Now, the first 4 are pretty universal that you hear from a lot of different people. The last one, with the way the game is played today, I thought was fascinating. Can you just kind of expound on that and what you have to be able to do to get yourself out of a bad play?
Sure. I feel very strongly about that. We actually did a show on Fox about that. And it's amazing to me in the NFL that you have all this available information and you make a mistake on drafting a quarterback. That amazes me. And it's the same thing in recruiting. I get very upset when one of our coaches recruits someone and, you know, everyone, black, white, tall, short, fast, slow, from south, from east, from west, you know, all those things don't matter. You know, society wants to believe that matters, those type of things. It doesn't. can you get your job done, and do you fit these qualities? So, for example, every great quarterback we had was the most competitive guy on the team. The number two thing, he was the toughest guy, and you have to be nowadays. You're the face of the program. If you're not tough, don't draft him, and we shouldn't recruit you. Number three is, are you intelligent? You have to, this is a complex game. You have to not only choreograph 10 guys on your offense, but you have to understand what the defense is doing. Are you lead? Can you raise the level of people around you, the play around you? If you can't, I know you throw the ball well, but you can't play here because the quarterback's the most unique position in all of sport. You have to be a leader. I've had quarterbacks say to me, I'm just not vocal, coach. I'm not a great leader. And I'm like, okay, well, I know you throw the ball well, but you're not playing. You can't play. And then the final piece is, it's not get out of a big play, because it's that falls under intelligence. It's just, can you extend a play? And that's going from, I think Roethlisberger is one of the greatest I've ever witnessed in the NFL. That son of a gun can make something out of nothing. And every great quarterback, Drew Brees to Russell Wilson to, I just was at the Chargers game and watching Rivers, unbelievable. He's got an awkward throwing motion. Notice I never said anything about how you throw the ball. There's been how many busts in the NFL of guys that can throw the ball well, but they can't have those other 5 qualities. And I feel very strong about that. And I also feel strong about that, the top 4 in every position we recruit. This game's too hard. And you'll get exposed on, 3rd down or 4th down and 2 in the third quarter on a bad weather day when you're down by 7 if you don't have those top 4 qualities.
Coach, this is music to my ears. I'm a first-year head coach at a high school program in the area. And so it's fascinating to watch you every week on Fox. I saw you do a segment maybe last week or 2 weeks ago on pass rushing. Now, my dad is a D-line coach, and he knows a lot about it. But to watch you go through and systematically break down, get off, like stance, get off, having a plan. When you're a head coach, is it important to be able to know how to coach all of the positions, or is that something that you kind of learn while you're doing it? You kind of get around good people and you pick up tips and tidbits from them.
That's a good question. And I think you have to learn on to say that when I was 35 years old, head coach of Bowling Green, I understood the way Larry Johnson, the best D-line coach in the country, teaches. So I think, you have to be one, I'm learning right now. I'm learning from you guys. And the minute you quit learning, that's when you fail miserably. So no, I think young coaches, to say that when I was 35, I had the same knowledge of the game that I have now. I would sit in meetings and I would never act like, I was an expert at quarterback and receiver play. That's what I did my whole life. And so I made sure I would sit in as many D-line, linebackers, secondary meetings as possible, because when I open my mouth, I want to make sure I'm speaking with experience and educated. A player will look at you like you got 5 heads. You come in here and start talking some nonsense, and you can't do that. This is great. This is great for you too as a coach. Bill O'Brien told me one time, we're talking about coaching Tom Brady, and he said, and I've been guilty of this, you have to walk in every meeting as if you're coaching Tom Brady, because if you go in there ill-prepared and babble, Tom Brady will shoot you down. He'll make you feel like you just wasted people's time. And so many times as a coach, you're not prepared for your meeting, you dumb it down, and then all of a sudden, and I've done it, I walked out of the meeting so upset at myself that I said, that was not a great meeting, because something came up and I had to go speak somewhere, I had to go do something. So your time in front of that team, coach, that you can't devalue that. You're going to impact every meeting. I would look at myself and say, before I went in, I said, I'm going to change someone's life today. This meeting will be the difference that we beat our rival. And so after talking to Tom O'Brien, I would just challenge my coaches all the time. And I'd walk into meetings and say, that was a good one or that was not a good one. And you have to, and I'm challenging you, coach, as a head coach of the high school, you realize that there's some 16-year-old in there, you're going to change his life. And if you look at that, you imagine how good that meeting's going to be. Yeah. If there's 4 people in that I'm not only going to change his life on the football field, I'm going to make him a better husband and father today. Tell me how you're going to react to that. You're going to attack that meeting like it's the last meeting you'll ever have. I think some people don't look at it that way.
Awesome.
Oh, that is awesome, Coach. That's just not for coaches. That's for life. That's great stuff. I want to ask you about a couple of these great players and just what you saw in them, and if there's a characteristic that they share. Let's go with just some. I want to go 3 defensive linemen. You got both Bosas, right? Nick and Joey, and then you just talked about seeing Joey out there at the Charger game, and then one that's still at Ohio State and Chase Young, who's the best in the country right now. What did you see in those guys as young players? And was it one of those deals where after the first high school game you watch, you're like, okay, I can figure this one out?
Yeah, you forget we had Sam Hubbard, Jalen Holmes, and Tyquan Lewis too. We've had a run of D ends here that are, and like I said, it's and I get off on these tangents about society wants you to believe that it matters if you're black or white, if you're northern or southern, if you're Christian or Jewish, I'm so sick and tired of hearing all that stuff. That doesn't matter. It matters about the characteristics I just talked about, the first 4, and that is, are you competitive? That Nick Bosa would never lose in a game of checkers. He's just, and you've been around guys like that. They just refuse to lose. Tim Tebow, I made a mistake one time and tried to play one-on-one basketball with him. He almost killed me. He just never loses. The same with Sam Hubbard. He was a safety. We converted to defensive end, but he never loses. So number 1 is competitive spirit. Number 2, are you a tough guy? Not a tough guy when you're beating, a lower level team. Are you a tough guy in the rivalry game on 4th down? And you can evaluate that in high school film. Are you a tough guy? Nick Bosa played his best at St. Thomas Aquinas in the biggest games. He did, if you play good against a team you beat by 60 points, who cares? That's called a front runner and a bully. How do you play in a tough one? Mm-hmm. Are you intelligent? This game's too football's a complicated game. And every one of those guys shared incredible work ethic that, they studied the game. And then can you lead? Can you lead those around you? Because you need to respect those around you. So every one of them, I would say, every great player, and you can throw Zeke Elliott in there. You can throw, J.T. Barrett, Tim Tebow, Percy Harvin. And the number 1 is the competitive spirit of that human being. And those are I think I saw something yesterday, a quote from old days. If I have a team that's competitive, I just have to prepare them. If you have a team that's non-competitive, then I have to motivate them. And everybody just wants to prepare your team.
Coach,
that's great.
You mentioned that early on it was all about quarterbacks and wide receivers. That's where your expertise is. So I kind of want to take you down that road with these young quarterbacks, one that just came out in Dwayne Haskins and another one that people are talking about in Joe Burrow. When you look at those guys, what is it about them, their makeup or whatever, that allows them to be successful at the level that they are and the level that they will be at?
2 great examples, and obviously 2 great, Dwayne Haskins is our best quarterback ever to play at Ohio State, and had 50 touchdowns last year and went 13-1 as his only time as a starter. Joe Burrow was a guy that was not as talented because Joe Burrow probably played more basketball. Dwayne was one of those guys, I used to call them spandex quarterbacks. And that's all they do is play, 7-on-7 and, put on the spandex and a headband, and they think that's football.
That's a good one. I like that. I'm stealing that one. I'm stealing that.
But his junior year, he was the best prepared quarterback I've ever seen in recruiting. And people say, "Come on!" I'm saying when I watched him work out and throw the football, at that age, I've never seen anything like it. Joe was a little bit further behind. You know why? Joe was also Mr. Ohio in basketball, and they had a great team in the state championships. And he's just one of those all-purpose tough guy leaders. And so he maybe was not a spandex quarterback, but became a great one because he worked so hard at it. Dwayne's leadership skills were okay, not very good. And he became a great leader by the time. He only played 1 year, but the last 4 or 5 games of his career at Ohio State, he was exceptional and became much more of a tough guy and competitor. He's always a competitor, but he became more of a tough guy. If you really watch him play the last few games, it was outstanding. That's why I think he's going to be a fine NFL quarterback. Joe Burrow, this is a no-brainer, absolute no-brainer. Now, can he throw as accurate as Dwayne? He's improved, but he wasn't that way. But his leadership skills, his toughness, his competitive, you talk about a competitive maniac. I mean, that's who Joe Burrow is.
Coach, this has been awesome. We've been so generous with your time. Just a couple more here. I'm just curious, when I look at you and Coach Saban's success you guys have had and haven't been on all these school calls, to have strength coaches, you've had Mickey forever, and then you look at Saban's had Cochran forever. and just the importance of that role with the time limitations in college football right now, and what that can mean for as you're growing a culture with that strength coach.
Well, we've got to be aligned with you. And Mickey Marotti is, first of all, we're built to the same cloth. He's a Western PA guy. I'm a Northeast Ohio guy. And just, when I bring that up to say the respect I have for those areas, that was built, it's all blue collar. It's all steel mill and coal and iron ore and, shipping. And that's the way I was raised. You're just, you better be tough in those areas or you get exposed. And so we believe in hard work. We believe in giving. There's nothing. Respect is not given. Respect is earned. So that's the approach we've had. We're aligned exactly. He became an expert in the sports science of player welfare, and then we took that to the nth degree, and they still do here. We still do here. But he is your eyes and your heartbeat of the team. And all success. We won 3 national championships together, and there's zero probability of that happening without him. That's how important he is to this program and me.
Coach, final one for me. I've heard you talk a lot, like not only in this interview but in previous interviews. I always kind of hear you talk about toughness. I hear you talk about the running game. I hear you talk about your influences, whether it's Earl Bruce or Lou Holtz and those guys. What is it about when you're thinking about Urban Meyer style of ball and the toughness part of it? Why is toughness so essential to being able to win in this game?
Well, the game was about toughness years before we entered the scene, and I got news years after us. This game, I know there's, spread offenses and what's the other one, air raid and all that. And the bottom line is that when you start, the objective is to win conference championships, and then the next is to win. The ultimate is the national title. And it will never be done unless toughness is part of that team. And toughness, to me, is fight through injury, fight through adversity. Toughness doesn't mean a bully. Doesn't mean that I'm going to go take a cheap shot at someone. To me, that's stupidity, and that's being a coward. Toughness to me is the guy that is going to run down on kickoff at 22 miles an hour and hit something going the other way at 20 miles an hour. And it's the guys on punt team. It's the guys that defensive tackles, nose guards. Toughness to me and coaching to me is getting people to do the unthinkables, the hard. A guy that can teach a guy how to throw a corner route or catch a touchdown pass, that, Donald Duck can do that. Can you teach the toughness and demand the toughness? To me, that's a great coach, and that's got to be a part of your culture. Because the game I got news. I don't mean to disappoint some of these people that think that throwing the ball is the only way to win. I see some of the hires in the NFL, and I see some of the, to me, it's almost a disrespect to the game of football. Football is about love, It's about toughness, and it's about team.
That is great stuff, Coach. I keep hearing the word toughness. With the Baltimore Ravens in the scouting department, we had speed, toughness, and instincts were the 3 that we kind of boiled everything down to, and that's what that culture of the Baltimore Ravens has been about forever. And it's no mystery to me that they've continued to win year after year. The players change; it doesn't matter because that's where they hang their hat. Coach, I thank you so much for your time. My last question, I'll let you run, but I look at you. You're so young. You've got such great energy. You've got so much to give. Do you miss it? Do you miss coaching?
Oh, I miss it terribly. There's things I don't miss. And there's things that I miss the team. I miss staff meetings. I miss finding greatness. One of the things that, there's been criticism in the past about giving people too many chances or being too loyal to a player. Keep those coming. Those are criticisms that I believe in. I believe in people. I believe that everybody sitting in that room that I'm coaching, there's greatness in them, and it's a coach's job to find it. I don't believe in elimination. I don't believe in, and that's just the way I've always been. So I do miss that. The other stuff, to be honest with you, I don't know if I do miss it. And I'm also strong in my faith. I realize I was extremely blessed for 33 years in this great game, and maybe there's other ways to help out. So.
Well, that's been wonderful, Coach. You've been so generous with your time. We can't thank you enough. We've got a sheet full of notes here that we've taken, and we really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, like I said, you guys, there's times I do an interview and I scratch my head and say, what planet are you guys from? You guys are great.
Hey, Coach.
This is awesome. Let's do it again. Let's do it again.
Hey, Coach, thanks. So Friday night, just know that there's a team in California and L.A. that's running the double wing, and we're doing it with UMI. It's all about toughness and all that other stuff. So just know Friday night when you're just sitting back
Tell me the team
somewhere, Granada Hills Charters, John Elway's old high school. So just know.
Oh, yeah, I've been to Granada Hills, yeah.
Yeah, so just know
Absolutely.
we're running the double wing, and our philosophy is we will not throw a pass because we want to run it down your throat. So just know we're dedicating this one for you.
Oh, come on, man. You got to flip it around once in a while.
That's the toss sweep. That's the toss sweep. That's what we call it. That's our
Great to talk to you guys.
Coach, last thing, no lie, I left that stadium as an 18-year-old and said, did I really just see Mark Lemke hit 2 home runs in this game? Are you kidding me? He hit like 5 home runs in his career. He hit 2 off Fernando that day.
Think about that. And he was my, not necessarily my roommate, but he was my partner, man. And he couldn't hit it out of the outfield. And then he's was a 42nd round draft pick out of Utica, New York. And he played, that tells you what kind of, the things I just said, tough guy, competitor, a maniac, and I love him to death.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Coach. Have a great day. Well, there you go, Buck. I mean, we've had a chance to talk with Dabo Sweeney. We've talked with Matt Rules, one of the hottest coaches going right now. We've had a chance to talk with Mac Brown, with Scott Satterfield, who's turned around Louisville. Eli Drinkwitz took over there at App State. The list goes on and on of all these coaches. Bob Stoops, who's won national championships. We've got them all, and Buck, this is as good as it gets right here with Urban Meyer. I mean, we say we've got a sheet full of notes. I mean, maybe we have 2 full sheets full of notes.
Oh man, so many notes. And I think DJ, like just listening to Urban talk, I mean, obviously you understand how he's been able to be so successful. You can sense the leadership. You can sense everything that he discusses in the conversation. You can sense that is who he really is when he talks about like believe it, sell it, demand it, wanting competitive guys, tough guys, smart guys, guys that are leaders. All of that stuff, it comes out. I think for me, it's unique because when he was at Utah, I was just starting. I was only in my 2nd year as a scout on the West Coast, and having watched that Utah team, and I didn't know much about Utah prior to going there. I knew they had a reputation for always kind of being tough guys. They had guys that played in the league. Those guys were kind of blue-collar and hard-nosed. But then taking what I witnessed years ago and watching how tough they were, how physical they were, how they played, how they competed, the effort that they exerted on the field, and then hearing him talk about it, it is interesting to see when someone's actions from their team match the words that they're constantly talking about, because I felt like when I looked at Utah play under him, it absolutely matches up. And then when we talk about his most recent successes at Ohio State, those teams were tough. They were physical. They played hard. The players that have come from those programs have had success in the league because they embody those traits. That was that was like a PhD in how to build a program, but better yet, it was a PhD in how to be a great leader of any organization.
And I thought, look, we've been kind of carrying the flag for multi-sport athletes in high school. That's really been kind of, it's not on our mission statement, but it is something that we're passionate about. And it's just, we just found another advocate that's on our side on this with Urban Meyer. Talked about his baseball playing career, playing with Ron Gant and Mark Lemke. I know growing up in the South, you're familiar with those old Braves teams. So it was neat to hear his kind of perspective on that, going and watching one of the top linebackers in college football right now play high school basketball. And that's what kind of sold him. We talked about Joe Burrow being Mr. Basketball in the state of Ohio. So I love that we continue to hit on that theme over and over again. And then, Buck, there's breadcrumbs that these coaches leave us. And I thought when Matt Rule was on, Matt Rule talked about, we asked him, right, when you take over this Baylor team, what do you say? And he said, his exact words were, I know you didn't choose me, but I chose you. Mm-hmm. Okay, I love that line. Well, Urban Meyer then comes on. We asked him, what did he say to Ohio State? The exact same thing. And then he gave us the truth. He said, I heard that from Lou Holtz, which David Singer, our booking department stud, who goes out and gets us all these great guests, the challenge is out there now. We've got to have Lou Holtz on because this is somebody that I think a lot of these coaches have learned from. So that's next on my hit list. I want to get Lou Holtz on here, and we can talk about how he kind of helped build that culture at Notre Dame that had an impact on Urban Meyer when he was a coach there, and that's been handed down to guys like Matt Rule. I mean, I feel like we're on a kind of a quest to kind of learn how all these things have come together.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fascinating because I think in any way of life. You're always looking for guys that you can model their behavior when they've been successful. What has enabled them to have consistent success in certain areas of their life? And I think we are in the football business. And so obviously we are always around coaches or team builders. And so when you hear guys who have a long, distinguished track record of being successful, and I think, DJ, since we started this project at the beginning of the year, I think the one thing that has been consistent for everyone has been toughness. And now they may define it differently.
Yes.
It is mental and physical, but toughness is a big part of being successful. And I thought he touched on something that was great. Are you a tough guy in those critical moments? Not when you're better or superior to your opponent, but are you a tough guy in rivalry games? Are you a tough guy in adverse situations? How do you respond when the cards are stacked against you? The toughness part of everything really matters. And I go back to Tom Crean, and Tom Crean talked about committing to toughness. We talked about Matt Rule. He talked about a tough program and being able to overcome and demanding more. The common denominator between all of these coaches that have been very successful at the level, toughness.
Yeah, it's so true. And he also, a theme we've been able to capture from a lot of these different coaches, and you touched on it there, Buck, is those tough moments. So quarterbacks, flip on the tape when you're down in the fourth quarter and you've got to make plays. Watch your best opponents. And we're going to get into the quarterbacks here in my kind of quarterback tiers, how we broke that up. But I do want to mention, the challenge for me in evaluating Tua Tagovailoa with Alabama thus far. People will say, well, how is he doing? Where would you rate him? I don't know. They're so much better than everybody they've played. I'll find out in a month when they get a chance to play LSU, when they get a chance to probably play Georgia in the SEC championship game should they win the LSU game, and I'll see him in 2 playoff games. Tua, the evaluation of Tua hasn't even started for me yet. I mean, I've watched this tape. I don't know. Be honest with you, I don't even know what I get out of it. I freeze the tape at the top of his drop. There's 10 feet of separation all over the field. So to me, those critical moments against tough teams, that carries more weight. It's like a weighted GPA. How do you do in those games? That matters.
It really does matter, DJ. And I think it kind of goes back, and we've talked about scouting and how if you're a young scout, how you kind of weight the games differently. We've talked about rivalry games and conference championship games and the college football playoff games, how it's a different level of weight to those games because the stakes are higher. Look, you have to perform in those games because it's a win-or-go-home scenario. And typically you want to see how those players respond to that kind of pressure. And so for Tua, look, we can talk about the one throw that he was able to make in the national championship game years ago, but really what you want to see is you want to see a long resume of performance in tough situations. When you don't have the stack team, when you don't have everything going your way, how do you perform in those environments? And when we look at some of the other quarterbacks that are going to be there, some of those guys have been tasked with doing more with less around them. And if you think about the teams that pick at the top of the draft, those are the teams that are going to ask the quarterback to do those things. We want you to make miracles happen without everything around it. And do you have the intestinal fortitude to deal with it when it doesn't go your way? And so these quarterback clusters in this year, it really will be interesting because I think you and I, not necessarily that we've changed as evaluators, but I do believe we value the intangibles a little more than maybe we had in the past. The guts, the grit, the ability to bounce back, that stuff matters a little more than some of the physical attributes that everyone goes crazy about.
100%. And that's going to lead us right to this little talking point here on the quarterback clusters. Now, when I did this over the summer, I had 14 quarterbacks I put in different clusters, different tiers, basically. Coming into the season, this was based off talking to people around the league. So I'm not going to – I had 4 tiers. I'm not going to go through 4 tiers. I'm going to give you the 2 tiers and how some of the shuffling has taken place here at the top. So before the season started, this was tier 1. It was Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama, Justin Herbert from Oregon, and then Jordan Love from Utah State. That was the tier 1 guys, which, let's be honest, that's firmly in the first round, okay? Tier 2 was Fromm from Georgia, Stanley from Iowa, Burrow was 6th on that list. He was in Tier 2, the bottom of Tier 2. And that's kind of, I look at that more like second, third round. Tier 3 was KJ Costello at Stanford, who's been hurt most of the year. Steven Montez from Colorado. Shea Patterson from Michigan. Jacob Eason, who a lot of people scoffed at. Like, he hadn't really done anything. He's transferred from Georgia to Washington. But I said, look, this is from scouts that have been up there, and there's a lot of buzz building on him, and he's going to be one to watch. Then Ian Book was the last one in that Tier 3. Those are kind of the middle round guys. Then the late round guys were Lewerke from Michigan State, Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma, who the transfer took place, and he was more of a runner at Alabama. How would that all work out? And then Kellen Mond was 14. So from that list of 14 guys, I've put it into 2 tiers. So I've got 1, 2, 3 guys in the Tier 1, and I've got 4 guys in Tier 2. So Tier 1 to me are guys that are firmly in the first round, and then Tier 2 are guys that are still trying to jockey to get their way into that range. Right now I have them just outside the first round. But here's what I have, Buck. I've still got Tua at the top of the list. And again, I mentioned it previously. I don't know. I mean, look, I think of myself that I've got a clue what I'm doing here. Evaluate. Been doing it a long time. I don't know how you evaluate the tape at Alabama with him at quarterback right now until they start playing some better opponents. So he's still number 1 for me. I've got Burrow number 2. Burrow has gone from Burrow was at the bottom of cluster 2. He's number 2 on the list. And then I've got Herbert right behind him. And that's very tightly packed there with those 3 guys. That could definitely evolve and change as we get through the scouting process. But what I've seen thus far, I have it Tua, Burrow, Herbert. Those are Tier 1 players all jockeying to be the first quarterback. I think it's a 3-man race.
I agree.
Then I go to Tier 2. So, I would love to get your thoughts on that. What do you think about those 3 in that order?
I agree, and I do believe that there's a faction of folks that are going to end up pushing up Joe Burrow over top of Tua. And I think we just go back to the conversation that we heard from Urban Meyer. And Urban Meyer talked about toughness, competitiveness, being able to kind of like get out of bad plays or all that other stuff. He talked about the adversity. Well, the one thing that we know from Joe Burrow, we have seen him have to deal with an adverse situation. He basically left Ohio State, had to go to LSU. Look, they brought him to LSU, but I don't know if anyone at LSU thought that he was going to emerge as this player that he has become. And then the more that you talk to people that were at Ohio State that talked about him, the common denominators continue to come out. Very competitive, very confident, tough, resilient. Then you throw in Mr. Ohio in basketball. So we've talked to a number of coaches that talk about the athleticism, multi-sport athlete. There are a lot of things that are beginning to line up in Joe Burrow's favor over some of the other quarterbacks. With Tua, I think I have some of the same concerns. I don't know if Tua will be a guy that if you take away the deep balls or whatever, that he's going to decide that he can be patient enough over a sustained period to be able to consistently beat you like that. We've seen that happen sometimes in games, and he's gotten away with it or whatever because his guys are superior. I just have a question about that. So I would say Tua and Burrow to me, and then there's a separation with Herbert. The issue that I have with Herbert is I view him as potential over performance. I haven't seen him consistently in a big game take over the game. Like, I would like to think that a guy that we view as a franchise quarterback, that there's a game where you're looking at the game and saying, this guy is the best player on the field. No, undisputed. There's not a question. And I don't know if I always walk away feeling that when I look at Justin Herbert. But look, you saw him up close and personal. What was your feel when you got a chance to watch him perform?
First of all, look, it was very heavily attended in terms of scouts. Miami Dolphins were there. They're on their way. As I mentioned on the show the other day, they're on their way out to watch LSU Bama this week, so they're doing all their homework on these guys. He wins warm-ups, Buck. I mean, to the point where we kind of talked about Josh Allen, and I talked about it was like Josh Allen was scouting crack just because of how big and strong and how live his arm was, and he could move around. Herbert can move around too. Now, I almost wish he would use his legs more than he does. He's a great athlete. He had a nice touchdown run against SC, but has really been reluctant as a runner. My concerns – let me start with the positives. I mentioned that size and athleticism. This dude, I just watched all of his 3rd and 6+ throws. When I'm scouting these guys, I like to cut out a lot of the bubble screen stuff, so I can sort the video. I can watch all of his throws on 3rd and 6+, where other team knows you're throwing. It's about as realistic as you're going to get at the college level of what you're going to see at the next level. And he makes and we'll get to Eason in a minute, but those two guys make some of the freakiest throws, man. I mean, talking about big power arms that can throw from the opposite hash, deep outs, no problem. So he can make some wow throws. He's accurate when he's on the move, when kind of design rollouts and things like that. The things that I'm just a little bit hesitant on right now, and there's still time and do more work on him, but just instinctive. Like, does he have a really good pocket feel for feeling pressure and sliding around? There's so many one-read throws, play action shots. So play action, you know exactly where the ball is going, boom. Or you're just in the gun, catch and throw, catch, rock, and throw. It's that first read, and I just don't see him oftentimes sitting back there, sorting through coverage, identifying where he wants to go with the football, making a post-snap decision. I see a lot of pre-snap decisions. And look, some of that, a lot of that's not his fault. I mean, that's the offense and the system that they run there at Oregon. But those are some of my reservations. I think Burrow and Tua are just a little more natural, a little more instinctive, a little less robotic with how they play.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. I think we've gone all the way back to the Auburn game when it was the Hail Mary situation. He threw it out the end zone. And you're like, man, come on, have enough awareness to give your guys a chance. Just understand what the situation is, be in the moment, and give your guys an opportunity. So I do believe we'll continue to have more conversations about that Tier 1 cluster. I'm really interested to hear who you have in Tier 2.
All right, Tier 2 for me. I've got Jake Fromm is the top of Tier 2. He was the top of Tier 2 before the season, so he really hasn't moved the needle yet. He was good. I haven't got a chance to watch the tape from last week. I was told he played well against Florida, but I haven't seen that tape yet. So I had Fromm. I have Jordan Love, who goes from Tier 1 down to Tier 2. Mm-hmm. But, again, you want to talk about some big boy throws, man. You watch the 3rd and 6 reel on him. You'll see some bad decisions. That's the stuff that you need to clean up. That's what worries me a little bit. But, man, he is a loose, live arm. So he's number 2. Jalen Hurts, for me, climbs up from he's in the bottom of Tier 4. He was number 13. I have him right there, and I have Eason right behind him. Eason was in Tier 3. He moves up to Tier 2. So Tier 2 is Fromm, Love, Hurts, and Eason. That's where I have those guys in that second tier.
I agree with all those guys. I think all those guys should be in the conversation. And, in fact, I think we've talked about I kind of call them the top 6. I have these top 6 as the guys that are serious contenders for me in terms of like guys that I would spend a lot of time studying because I think these starters, I believe these guys are the ones that are starters. Jacob Eason to me is fascinating because, man, he's prototypical size, great talent, big time arm. For whatever reason it didn't happen for him at Georgia. He goes to UW, and I think he has found the sweet spot. He and Chris Peterson, I think, connect. Jake Fromm, you have to give him credit because this dude has fended off all challengers coming for his job. Justin Fields, who is killing it at Ohio State, he was able to ward him off. Jacob Eason, he basically took his job. So Jake Fromm has something that allows him to compete when everyone is gunning for him. I think that's something that you can't discount. You shouldn't dismiss it. Doesn't have the biggest arm, but I do believe in the right system. You put him in place, he's going to be a solid starter because he just understands how to play the game, and there's something to that, and I think some coaches will find comfort in that. The wild card of the bunch is Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts' improvement this year has probably been the biggest improvement that I've seen from any quarterback since I've been scouting. I've never seen a guy that was probably dismissed or pegged as a runner become a guy that you're like, you know what, Jalen Hurts he really can pass. Like he throws the ball really well in this system. It works for him or whatever. And I have linked him. Look, Dak Prescott is polarizing on the outside, but to me, he is a Dak Prescott-like prospect, meaning whatever you think about Dak is probably what you're going to think about Jalen Hurts. Big lower body, physical, can throw it, offers some stuff with his legs that will allow you to maybe extend plays and extend drives. But I do believe he's going to have to play in the right system for him to have success, and he might need to be surrounded by the right supporting cast, much like a Dak Prescott, but we've seen that work in the National Football League. So it's going to be interesting to see Tier 1, Tier 2, where these guys stack up and where they kind of come off the board. A lot of teams that are looking for quarterbacks, but then a lot of teams that currently have like young quarterbacks in place. It'll be interesting to see where we grade them at and how they're eventually going to be valued by teams that are in need.
The only guy you didn't touch on there was Love, Utah State.
Yeah,
We had a chance, obviously, to talk to Gary Anderson, his coach, a little bit earlier too.
Yeah, so Love was one, like at the beginning of the year, he had a lot of buzz, so you paid a lot of attention to him. And I think for me, I might have stepped back a little bit because of the decision making. Yeah, the turnovers and the like. But we said the same thing about Pat Mahomes, and I don't want to link him too tightly to Pat Mahomes, but there are a lot of scouts that are on the road that because of whatever they may have made a mistake on with Pat Mahomes in terms of not giving the big grade, Jordan Love is going to be the beneficiary because Jordan Love has some of the similar attributes and traits, some of the throws, the arm talent. You see him make some wild plays, and I worry about us making a mistake of saying, like, hey, we saw Pat Mahomes do this, and Pat Mahomes, it was a perfect storm in Kansas City, but I do believe he's going to get the Pat Mahomes bounce. I'm just trying to figure out where is that sweet spot in terms of his potential, his performance, his production, and where that grade should be.
Yeah, here's the challenge. I mean, in an era where it's the numbers should be eye-popping. He's upside down, touchdowns to picks. So he's got 9 touchdowns, 12 picks. Now, they played LSU, they played Wake Forest. Those are two teams where they were very overmatched. And look, even BYU, they got smashed by BYU. He throws for almost 400 yards, but he throws 1 touchdown, 3 picks. So he's got a 3-pick game against BYU, a 3-pick game against LSU, which was predictable, and a 3-pick game against Wake Forest. So he's had the numbers are nowhere near where they were last year. To me, Buck, I think you kind of hit on it, which is you're buying the ability over the production. It's a risky game to play when you do that, when you look at the production he has. But golly, if you have the infrastructure to work with somebody like this, it's limitless with the talent that he has. I mean, he is as talented as any of these guys. But it's not clear packaging, right? You have to open the box and you got to put a lot of these pieces together.
Yeah, you got to put it together. But it's fascinating. I think he's in a situation where, much like Pat Mahomes, if you already have a guy but you're looking for the next guy, I think that would be a great situation for him where he doesn't have the immediate pressure of having to be thrust into the starting lineup. And I know we'll talk about this every spring, like, hey, it'd be great for a guy to sit and develop. But we know now in the National Football League that's not what happens. But if they do have an established starter, one that may be a little longer in the tooth, it would be a good situation for him to serve a redshirt year and then maybe be able to kind of step onto the field after that.
Well, we've got Alabama, LSU this week. That's going to be a fun game to watch. I cannot wait to see how these quarterbacks do. I hope Tua plays. I know coming off that ankle surgery, there's a little bit up in the air about whether or not he's going to give it a go. But, again, from a valuation standpoint, man, I sure hope he does play. Penn State, Minnesota, 2 other unbeatens playing this week. Minnesota, I mean, to me, I think that looks a little bit more about their schedule. I think I'm going to go with the Nittany Lions on that one. We'll see what happens there. But KJ Hamler is a player we've talked about before from Penn State who's just so explosive and also has some of that toughness. Doesn't have the size, but fast and tough is a good place to start for that little wide receiver.
Look, man, good place to start. He also is a returner. He's a guy that has some juice. And I think we're not used to seeing, maybe because of the uniforms in Penn State, we're not used to seeing guys that are fast. But whenever you pop on the tape, you see him make big plays. Watching him, having known him since when he was high school, he has really kind of come into his own. That'll be a good game. I do wonder about Minnesota and the competition that they face, but we'll see. P.J. Fleck has them rolling. We'll see if he can continue when they take on Penn State.
All right, let's get to some of these questions here. Nabil, you got a couple questions? What we got?
All right, first one. Who do you think is a better QB, Dak Prescott or Carson Wentz?
Oh, man, Bucky, we've done this debate. I feel like we've done this debate 100 times. I'll go first on this because it's kind of a cop-out. You're going to say it's a cop-out because I'm not directly answering the question. If I had to go win a game tomorrow, one game, I would take Carson Wentz. I think Carson Wentz's best football is better than Dak Prescott's best football. Now, if you tell me you're kind of looking off into the future, I can't dismiss the fact that Dak Prescott, when they line up to play every Sunday, is in uniform and out there on the field and he's playing. I think it's something, I talked to Jane Slater earlier this week about it. I think he's, 56, 58 straight starts or whatever. Carson Wentz has had durability issues. So that to me is something I could see going in Dak's favor if you're looking, okay, which one of these guys you want to buy in on going forward. But I will stand by the fact I think when Carson Wentz is at his best, he can reach a higher level than what Dak can reach.
Yeah, no, I can see that. He's more talented, and I think their draft position speaks to the talent that Carson Wentz has. Carson Wentz was arguably the best college football player in the draft. Like, he had prototypical size, he had big-time dimensions, he had big-time performances at North Dakota State, and you saw it. I think Dak Prescott was a little bit more of an unknown at Mississippi State. I do believe some of the character stuff is what dinged him down because of the fights and the other stuff that came out with the DUIs. But I still think he was going to be positioned as a second or third round pick. The difference between the two has been Dak Prescott has been available. And because when you're available and he's been steady Eddie, I think there's a comfort sometimes for scouts in knowing exactly what you're going to get. It may not be A-level performance, but it's a B-plus performance where I can build my team around that because I know exactly what he is. I would say that Carson Wentz's ceiling is higher because he's more talented, but I think you'll see a steady Eddie consistent performance from Dak Prescott throughout his career because he's just kind of that player. I think it really comes down to styles and what you prefer and what you like. If you're trying to hit the home run, Carson Wentz is the pick. If you're into singles and doubles, maybe Dak Prescott.
Yeah, he's been more reliable. That's you can't dispute that. And Dak is a darn good player. I told Jane this, Buck, and we talked about it. I love the phrase. I've used it forever. Just that confetti test. And Dak Prescott passes the confetti test for me. I can see the confetti falling on his shoulders, hoisting a Super Bowl trophy. He's a championship caliber quarterback, in my opinion.
Look, man, he understands how to play winning football, and I think the leadership ability, the toughness that we've heard many coaches talk about,
yes.
he has that. And I think maybe his biggest traits, maybe his toughness, his leadership ability, his competitive spirit, all of those things that you check off before you get to the physical talent, he has that. And I think that's why his teams tend to rally behind him. And when you're the Dallas Cowboys and you see how it plays out in your locker room, that may be why they value Dak Prescott more than some people on the outside.
No doubt. All right, Nabil, what's next?
What do you see being the next phase for the Buffalo Bills and GM Brandon Beane's process? And do you see him spending in 2020 in free agency?
Well, I haven't looked at the 2020 free agency list, Buck. But to me, when I look at what's next for this team, I feel like they've done a nice job of kind of building up the trenches of this team. I think you still see them continue to double down there. I think this offensive line is really developed into a pretty good unit. I think you could probably use another player there. But I would say at this point in time now it's about adding some more playmakers around Josh Allen. You've done a nice job of investing in the O-line, D-line. Your defense is all front to back is really good. I think offensive, a little more juice, a little more firepower is probably what's next.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's all about now putting the icing on the cake. The cake is solid, the cake is tasty, but then what kind of icing do we want to put on it? And that icing comes in the forms of playmakers. And I would say on both sides of the ball. Offensively, look, I know they got Singletary from FAU, but I still think they could use another big-time back. Imagine a guy like, they won't probably be able to have him, but imagine if DeAndre Swift comes out and if he was available, how he would impact that offense having somebody with juice behind Josh Allen. They've tried the wide receiver thing, but another big-time receiver or tight end would certainly help. And then on defense, I just think is another playmaker, someone either on the front line that can go and get sacks and create disruption, or a second level defender, someone that can make plays. We talk about it, man. It is all about turnovers in this game. Someone that runs fast, that can get to the ball and make the ball pop out. Those guys have value. I think Buffalo is missing that kind of playmaker. That is when they'll go from good to contending status, when they have more of those kind of players, more of those blue players that we talk about.
Yeah, get Tremaine Edmonds a little partner there.
Yes.
You see it with Dallas having a couple of those guys. Tremaine Edmonds is a nice building block there. Ed Oliver up front. You're hoping he's going to end up being a really, really good player. And then you look in the back end, Tre'Davious White. But I'm with you. Just maybe an edge rusher would probably be the top of my list on the defensive side of the ball. Get some youth there. But, man, I just think a little spice. They've done a nice job building that foundation, put a little icing, as Bucky said right there. All right, that's going to do it for us today. I want to thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. Great to catch up with Urban Meyer and get an idea, a little secret sauce there, what's gone into the programs that he's built. And I know if some of you are listening going, wait a second, you guys didn't ask him about USC. Did he tell you not to ask about USC? Did he not want to talk about USC? No.
We just didn't have any interest about him going.
We know what the answer is going to be to that question. They have a coach. I'm just happy doing television. We're not We're not investigative journalists. We're not trying to get a rise out of Urban Meyer. I know what the answer is going to be. That's why we didn't ask it. So, anyways, hope you're able to get something out of that conversation in terms of building a winning culture, something he's done every place he's been. All right, that's going to do it for us. He's Bucky Brooks. I'm Daniel Jeremiah. We'll catch you next time right here on Move the Sticks.